Sam Warren, welcome to the Sport Profile.
Thanks for having me, Dylan. Appreciate it.
I'm super excited for this, dude. You have such an interesting perspective to you that few others do, which is that you're a former athlete, former college football player at Syracuse University, and now you are a sports writer
hmm
for the Houston Chronicle covering the Texans, the Rockets. You got some Astros in there too?
I do a little bit of Astros as well.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so you're really well-rounded within the Houston sports space.
hmm
But, my first question to you is that, you, like I just said, you have that unique perspective. How does your former days as like a college athlete impact you as a journalist now? Because, many journalists, maybe played high school sports and they know it from that perspective. But, even in high school, the media coverage is slim. You went to Syracuse, big ACC school, big time program. And then obviously, being in journalism, one of the best schools in the country for that.
Yeah, I think it impacts it in a couple ways. I think first, just kind of like a knowledge base of the game of football.
Sure.
That definitely helps me with my reporting. Um, you know, writing the articles and knowing kind of what I'm talking about and having that authoritative background, but also going into the locker room and asking guys questions that maybe not everybody would ask. Kind of picking up on certain things from the
Mm.
game that I think could lead to interesting stories, kind of smaller nuggets, those kinds of things. And then also, I think it helps a lot with navigating a professional locker room, having been in
Sure.
one for so long and knowing kind of the dynamics and it's you're in their space for a living. Like the locker room is a sacred space for athletes. You're kind of invading that for the 45 minutes to an hour that you get allowed in there. So
Right.
just knowing how to approach athletes, how you can make them comfortable in their space, how you can create connections with them, while you're navigating and doing stuff where they're not the most comfortable. So
Sure.
I think I have a good grasp from my playing days on how to approach that locker room dynamic, and I think that's really helped me make connections with players kind of in my career.
No, I think that's great. And you mentioned something very interesting there that I kind of want to pick on is that you said the locker room is a sacred space and you know how to conduct yourself in a way that, makes athletes comfortable. But obviously that's everybody's goal, whether you have experience in a football locker room or not. So what would you say are some of the best ways that you get athletes to be comfortable in that sacred space that outsiders are invading?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is like you get given so much time to be in there. It's important to use it. Like
Mm,
sometimes you don't want to be standing around in there and not really doing your job, or being hesitant to approach people because that makes them uncomfortable in the first place. So if
sure.
you're just kind of standing around, not really doing anything, then it feels like you're kind of just invading their space and not really serving your purpose there. But if you're around, you're
Mm,
personable, you're creating connections with players. Even if you don't need them for an interview or anything like that, you're just there trying to be a personable person, develop connections with them, create relationships. So, actually humanizing the athlete and getting to learn them a little bit more, I think is some of the best things that you can do in a locker room, even if
yeah.
you're not interviewing them for a story. Creating those relationships are going to help you down the line, because you've taken the initiative to get to know them as a person. You've taken the initiative to kind of learn a little bit more about themselves, and they know that you actually care about that rather than you're just using them for your story
Sure.
or clicks or anything like that. So making those relationships in the locker room without any prerogative is something that I think is really important.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy there because you kind of want to do both simultaneously. You want to obviously get athletes for your interviews and what you're working on, but the other side of it is you do want to humanize them and make those, authentic and genuine connections that,
Mm,
do humanize them. It's like, hey, you're not just using me for this soundbite or something like that.
absolutely.
So when you were an athlete, I assume you were getting interviewed as well or have seen your teammates get interviewed too.
Mhm.
What made you feel the most kind of at ease when, either you were getting interviewed or, you saw one of your teammates getting interviewed?
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things about athletes is sometimes there are athletes that are very open about talking about themselves and
Yeah.
giving kind of background into themselves, but I think more often than that, m- athletes are more comfortable speaking about their teammates and what their teammates have done well,
Oh,
and
definitely.
getting background into those guys a little bit
Yeah.
more. So those are kind of the questions that put guys at ease a little bit more, if you
Okay.
get them talking about, what their teammates have done well, what happened well with a couple other guys in the game, and then you can kind of ease them into questions about themselves.
I
I
see.
think that really helps, and also, that gives you color and good stuff for if you're working on a story on somebody else too. So I think some of the best
Yeah.
quotes normally come from supplementary sources on
Oh, for
when whether
sure.
you're working on a profile or anything like that. So yeah, I think those are definitely the questions that I would get a little bit uncomfortable talking about myself, for
Sure.
sure. So anytime that I could talk a little bit more about the team, that's what guys are focused on, and athletes are focused on for the most part. So if you
Right.
can get them open up a little bit about that, and then you can maybe finish off with some questions about themselves if you really need to dive
No,
in there.
yeah, that makes sense. We were just talking, I guess, in the realm of football, but
Mhm.
with your work covering the Rockets, you said dabbled in a little bit of the Astros. Is it locker room specific? Do those principles apply to the different locker rooms that you've been a part of outside of football?
Absolutely, I think so. I think football is interesting because there's so many guys in
Sure.
there, that there's so many new faces that you need to meet. I think you
Right.
can establish even closer relationships in sports like basketball and baseball, because there's less bodies in there. There's less
Hmm.
people that you need to know. You're creating almost um, you know creating almost more meaningful and establishing more meaningful relationships because there's less people to focus on, I guess. Especially in basketball, having gone on some road trips and with the Rockets and made some relationships there, I felt
Hmm.
it. There's more people, or I mean, there's less people to recognize you. There's
Right.
less people for you to recognize, so it's a little bit easier to work a locker room, get them to know you, get to know them a little bit more.
Interesting. Did you kind of approach that the same way, when you first took over? I'm curious, like how you approached that when you first got the beat last year. I believe it was last year or 24
Yeah.
that you got the beat. I'm curious, like how you made those initial relationship pushes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a little bit, especially with football, it's you're going around and you're introducing yourself to everybody. I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing to do, because if you kind of just show up and um, start doing your job without establishing who you are, I don't think there's going to be people that are with so many players, so many
Right.
coaches. They're not gonna remember. You're not the most important part of their job, so
Sure.
they're not going to remember you without going up and making an introduction and establishing some respect. But I think interestingly enough for me, having played college football so recently, if I didn't play against some of these guys, I you know more often than not I probably know somebody that played with them um,
Oh, okay.
or had some parallels with coaches or anything like that. So kind of going up and with the connections that I have, going up and kind of giving them some background on
It's
who I
kind of like
am.
the friend of a friend mentality.
Exactly. Yes. I think, that's something that I have on my side, having those connections and having that
Right.
background a little bit, that I can go up and I can tell some of these stories to these guys, and then something that's they're interested in because, they're fond of their college days as well.
Of
They're
course.
fond of their, early high school days, those kinds of things. And they like to reminisce as well. So,
Right.
if you can start getting the guys to talk football stories, not just specifically about the team or anything like that, that's also a good way to crack them open.
Oh, definitely. Now, the other side of the dynamic that I'm kind of curious about is your relationship with your fellow beat writers when you're traveling all across the country. How close are you with like that core group of writers? And there's been conversations in sports media about coverage of away games between certain teams, not really alluding to anything specific, but it's just been seen. But I'm curious, like what your relationship is to some of the other beat writers that cover these teams on a daily basis, that go to all these games. How close are you guys together?
Yeah, so I have a beat partner, Jonathan Alexander, with Houston Chronicle, and I think we're really close. I think we have a good working relationship, and we kind of know our responsibilities on a given game day. We're very collaborative during the week on stories that we kind of want to pursue, kind of laying that out there on the line. I think we did a really good job of that on this recent Texans playoff run. And then there's other folks on the beat that are traveling as well. We have, our ESPN NFL Nation reporter, DJ Bienemy. We have some TV folks here. The Houston Chronicle is a one paper town, so me and
Right.
Jonathan and DJ are really, writing focused reporters on the beat. But I think the Texans beat it together is pretty close knit. I think we all have a really good working relationship, and
Sure.
yeah, it's when we go on the road. I don't think that really changes or anything like that. It definitely gets smaller, with less people at games and everything like that. But
Right.
I honestly feel that the job of a beat reporter almost gets a little bit easier when you're out on the road,
Hmm.
because it is smaller, and then the fact that players take respect and kind of notice when you are traveling and you've made that commitment
Yeah.
to go to their games and you go out on the road because they know you've made that commitment. You've put in the effort to go and interview them, be where they're going to be talking. So I feel like going out on the road and being at away games is one of the things that um, helps create relationships the best with players in the locker room and things like that.
Okay.
Um, just because you've made the commitment, they see that, and if you're in there for pretty much every game, they're gonna recognize your face the most, and you're gonna be talking to them all that time. So I think that's one of the things that unfortunately, with the way that things have gone
Right.
in recent times, like that's something that I hope doesn't go away because I think that's one of the most valuable assets to a journalist is being able to go out on the road, form those
Oh, we
relationships away from home,
we
and
share
get
that
out.
perspective
Yeah,
100%,
yeah.
without question. But it's good to know that like you guys are really close.
Hmm.
And I think it was the Houston Chronicle. A good friend of mine, Varun Shankar, just joined the
Yep,
Chronicle.
yep.
He and I went to grad school together. Great guy, great reporter, deep knowledge about the NBA. So shout out Varun. I'm curious about the you know the dynamic of a beat writer is that you're kind of always on, right? You're following everything. I'm sure this is a super busy time for you on the Rockets side of things, being the trade deadlines coming up. But you know, during this very busy time, how are you kind of trying to stay grounded, true to yourself? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like your head hits the pillow at some point, even though the perception is that beat writing is a 24/7 job.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of establish the things that are important to you.
Sure.
So, I mean, still as a former athlete, I like to stay in shape. I
Absolutely.
like to, go work out, put work into my body and make sure that I'm feeling good. So, I make it important, to carve out time every single day to get some sort of exercise in. That's something that I'm not, willing to sacrifice with my job. So
Yeah.
I find a way to get something like that in every day, and I think that kind of exercises some demons and takes my mind off of things for a
Sure.
little bit. So being able to escape, get active in some way, especially like getting outside, getting some fresh air, seeing some
Yeah.
sunlight every once in a while,
Yeah. I
is
wish we
definitely
had that.
something.
Yeah. You want to send that my way? That'd be great. We got 2 feet of snow and gray clouds.
But yeah, I mean, it was cold down here in Houston for a little bit, but now we're back into the 70-degree range. So
Oh,
can't
poo
complain.
poo. What was cold to you? When you
Well,
said it was cold, what was cold?
so the freeze was down here. It was like in the 30s, the 20s. And we're
Okay,
I mean,
lower than I thought,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
woke
but
up this morning when it was 5.
I'm used to the cold in Syracuse, so
Oh, true,
I can
yes.
relate.
Yeah, no, so you got it. You got a little bit of that stamina built up within you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a bit more. That's right. I put the connection together. You went to Syracuse. You have been in that environment before. So, mutual respect is extended without question. I have a good friend of mine in Florida who said, yeah, it dipped below 60 and everybody's sending into a panic. I'm like, oh, poo poo. Poo poo to you. 55 degrees. So sad. And then I texted him this morning a screenshot of what my weather app said, and it was 4. It got up to 5. We're on it. We're
Yes.
on a slight uptick here.
See, that was definitely a perk of coming down here to
Right.
Houston. Yeah, escaping and the summers aren't great with the humidity and the 100-degree heat, but
Yeah, that's not great. But
definitely definitely this time of year, it's
well,
good to escape that.
again, you have that perspective that few others do. You have that appreciation, that deep appreciation for it. I mean, look, you can still complain and bitch about the heat too. 100-degree weather with 95% humidity is not great, but you're not shoveling 2 feet of snow.
Yeah, we're not having to deal with the snow down here, which is good.
Right.
But that gives me the opportunity to get out and be active and enjoy my life.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Had you lived anywhere besides Syracuse in that area? You grew up on the
Yeah.
Northeast, I believe, right?
So I grew up in San Francisco, and then I
Oh,
went
so
out
you know
to
every weather pattern.
yeah. I went out to Syracuse, went back to San Francisco a little bit. My first job out of college, I was covering the Oakland A's for the San Francisco Chronicle,
Yeah. Oh, right,
and
right, right. I
then
remember that.
moved back out east, and I was working for ESPN in production for a little bit, working on College Game Day, working on the
Wow.
NFL drafts, and really liked that job. But I wanted to get back into reporting and kind of being where the
Sure.
action is. So I found this opportunity with Houston, and I've been down here for now 2 years.
Oh, it's awesome. What has, I know you just articulated, you went back and forth. What really helped you with that transition of, moving cross country? And, I think the nature of being an athlete and traveling, you know, kind of helps with that too. But the mental aspect, if you could touch on that a little bit, what helped you kind of ease through, maybe some tough transitions there?
Yeah, I think probably just having the goal in mind. Like obviously I think going across the country with not really knowing anybody that was going to Syracuse from my high school or anything like that,
Right.
not really knowing anybody on the football team at that time. That was difficult. Pursuing playing D1 football was a dream that I always had. And then being a sports journalist on top of that was also a dream that I had. So being able to have the opportunity to do both at one
Yeah.
of the better schools in the country, like that was something that I always had to keep in mind if I was going through hard times,
Sure.
or struggling a little bit mentally or anything like that. So just always putting things in perspective and understanding why I was doing certain things. That was also the thing with ESPN, is like, did I exactly want to be living in that area? Probably not.
Then
But
you're definitely getting
knowing
2
that
feet of snow.
but knowing that I was working in kind of creating connections at a company that I always dreamed of working at,
Sure.
and doing something that I thought was super cool, like always putting that in perspective and understanding the reason of things, was something that
Yeah.
I think was important in establishing my mental strength and keeping everything.
No, I think that's a great perspective. I really do. It's an interesting dynamic, to be able to do that. Obviously, go cross country, not knowing anybody is interesting too, and definitely takes a certain level of intentionality to do that
Mhm.
because, you don't just do that on a whim. I mean, maybe some people do. They have skills that I sure as hell don't. With that dynamic of you being in school, you said you wanted to do, D1 football. You wanted to be a, sports journalist. Obviously, Syracuse, pairs those two very, very well. But was the NFL ever an aspiration for you? I'm kind of curious about
I
where
think
that
uh,
went into the mix.
I think I realized pretty quickly once I got to Syracuse how hard an NFL dream would end up being.
Oh, for sure.
I think as most kids who go into a high level Power Five program,
Yeah.
they get humbled pretty quickly
Really?
and understanding what's going on. So I played with a bunch of NFL guys at Syracuse. I remember kind of one of the first few practices of my first training camp with Syracuse. We were doing kind of just one-on-one, close together, like hitting drills, form tackling drills.
Yeah.
I got paired up with Andre Cisco, who was a third round pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's now with the New York Jets, I believe.
Yeah.
Safety, and it wasn't like he was even coming at me full speed, but just the brute force that he hit me with was like, oh, this is this is something
He's
different. He wasn't even
yeah.
trying to, blow me up or anything like that. But this is a different level of athlete that we're dealing
He's
with
just a
here.
world
So
ahead of you.
yeah. So I realized pretty quickly that probably journalism was the career path that was I was gonna end up going on.
Yeah.
Um but I think, understanding that and putting that in perspective was also something that was cool for me because
Right.
you know, being in that locker room, being with Syracuse, I was kind of learning double time
Sure.
with like I was taking things that I was learning from my teammates, learning from my coaches, how they wanted to interact with the media, and thinking about like, okay, when I do this in the future, um, what can I do? What can I use from this that will help me, interact with coaches, interact with players? What are the types of questions that I can be asking them that
Yeah.
will get them to open up? How am I creating relationships with my teammates in the locker room that I can, take to the next level? Take
Mhm.
to a professional space. So I think that was always something that I was keeping in mind. Once I pretty much knew that, there wasn't a whole ton of future for me as a player,
Sure.
kind of in the next level.
Sure. Well, at least the dream wasn't, crushed because of an injury or
Yeah.
something like that. Like, a handful of, sports journalists have, sometimes, I mean, listen, I'm part of it too. The injured athlete to journalist pipeline, strong group.
Uh,
But what you just articulated was very interesting to me too. You were picking up on certain things from your coaches, your teammates, and then applying that to your journalism career, down the line. If you could articulate one or two of those lessons that really stuck out and resonated with you, I think that'd
yeah.
be interesting.
So I think just in general, I think from the get-go, it's unfortunate that it's kind of this way, but I think there's always a connotation from inside the locker room, from the team, from the coaches and the players that you're talking to that it's a little bit of an adversarial relationship with the media for
Sure.
them. Um, like that there isn't much for that they're getting from you, more that you're kind of just getting stuff from them, and
Right.
most often than not, like they feel that that's kind of negative, and
Sure.
you're seeking negative information from them. And sometimes, obviously, if it's a losing team, if there's any sort of turmoil going on, it is pretty easy for a player to think like, okay, all they want is the negative information. They just want to get stuff out of me that is bashing my teammates, bashing
Right.
the team, things like that. But I think it's important, that I learned not that you're seeking, negative stuff. It's more that you're trying to understand the situation and trying
Right.
to establish that um, I'm not I'm not going in any opinionated way.
Right.
I'm not coming in here to criticize or critique you. I'm just trying to understand the reason why certain things are happening. And if you're able to articulate your questions in that way, I think you're able to get your sources, your players, your coaches to open up a little bit more. because you're, going at it from a curiosity standpoint and rather
Sure.
from than a opinionated or, kind of attacking way. I think that's
Yeah.
always the best thing to go about. That's definitely something that I picked up from the way that my coaches were talking about us speaking to the media, kids that I was seeing and my teammates seeing them be interviewed, those kinds of things, the things that they were receptive to, things that they were kind of standoffish about.
Sure.
That was one thing that I definitely picked up from being on the team and gaining that perspective.
It's huge. That I think you just described the biggest misconception in sports media. And I've heard this before on this show, but also just in professional interactions. I genuinely believe the biggest misconception in sports media between athletes and journalists and like media relations folks is that it is always adversarial. It's not. It's not, and it doesn't have to be, because it's like we both have a job to do, whether it's an athlete, they have a job to do, you as a journalist have a job to do, PR folks, they have a job to do. It's not always adversarial. Sometimes, sure, it is, but obviously the tenet of journalism is to hold people accountable and things like that. You're just doing it in different ways. I've always pushed back against that premise that yeah, they are always at odds. They're always trying to bicker with each other. It's like, no, you're just trying to do your job in a fair way.
Mm.
And if people can see that, it's like, well, maybe we can get a lot more done. And it is sad, like you said, how, and obviously not accusing anybody of anything, but it is sad how certain coaches and players kind of already have that narrative kind of ingrained in them.
Yeah. But I think, as we were talking about earlier, I think that's the importance of creating connections and creating
100%.
personal relationships with coaches, with players. Because if you have that grounds already, you have that relationship formed. They know that you've put in the effort to get to know a little bit more about their
Right.
background, get to know them as a person. When it does come time to ask those more uncomfortable, those less positive questions, I think that makes them a little bit more receptive to open up to you. And also, you're not coming from a attacking or
Right.
critical standpoint. You're coming from more of like I talked about, kind of curiosity and
Yes, absolutely.
curiosity standpoint.
Do you think, you know, do you think that mentioning that you're an athlete, Syracuse football alum, even more specifically, do you think mentioning that to any athlete of any sport, do you think, or a coach, do you think that automatically, maybe lowers the guard a little bit, lowers the resistance? Because it's like, in their mind, maybe they go, oh, I know he knows the environment I'm in.
I would hope so. I think I've definitely created some good relationships off of,
Absolutely.
some common ground, having played against some guys,
Sure.
having known some teammates of theirs, those kinds of things. Like, there's even a teammate of mine, on the Texans, Jawar Jordan, who, we came in at the same recruiting class with
Oh,
Syracuse.
no
So
kidding.
yeah,
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
those kinds of things, yeah. So I mean, having him in the locker room, and
Yeah,
knowing, that there's a common, there's a familiar face, and he can point me out to other guys. I think that
oh,
definitely helps. But
100%.
yeah, I think I would hope that um, my background establishes a little bit of credibility in the job that I do, and it kind of lets people
100%.
know that I know what I'm talking about. I know that the kind of environment that they're in, or at least, definitely not to a professional level and understanding that the pressures they're under, but having been at least at a environment where there is, some of those tensions and there is some of that pressure, and
Yeah,
understanding the expectations that get put on, athletes at that, stage of their career. I think that definitely, you know, establishing that I've been through a little bit of that, definitely can,
right.
establish some credibility for me.
No, for sure. That makes sense. So, Sam, the last question I do ask everybody on the show is, professionalism aside, your work with the Texans and Rockets and, the Houston Chronicle at large aside, just really you as a person, Sam Warren, what's something you like most or admire about yourself?
Hmm. I think something that admired the most about myself, I guess, would be kind of like we were talking about it, but kind of my curiosity and always
Yeah,
kind of questioning things is like just
I think it's
always
great.
trying to dive a little bit deeper and questioning, always kind of just asking why, because I think that's kind of the way that the best
Hmm.
stories get formed, um, and kind of always wanted to discover new things. I think I have a pretty strong work ethic,
Yeah,
and I always try to differentiate my stories and kind of dive deeper into getting more background research, learning a little bit more about the people that I'm interviewing and getting information from unique areas and looking into that. So I think definitely um, kind of the constant questioning and always trying to find out more information. That's obviously a good skill to have in this job.
sure.
But I think also it gives me kind of a good perspective on life and always kind of just a good perspective on a bunch of different things. So I think that's definitely something that I like about my approach to my job and kind of just my life in general.
No, I think that's great. It really is. It's evident because it shows in the work that you do. It's very clear in the stories you write, how you storytell, and just gives you that innate sense of like empathy that really not many people have, based on your background, based on the perspectives that you bring to your job every day. So maybe we all continue to bring that perspective and empathy into any setting, no matter what our job is. Sam, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate having me on.